Hi everyone. The last section I want to talk about in chemistry is section 2.7, the nucleic acids. And I think out of any of them, nucleic acids can be the most confusing to people because they seem to be a little more abstract, but they're actually they're extremely important to us biologically. And they're important in this course because we're going to actually spend a section on DNA and technology. And a lot of health science is moving towards DNA and technology. In fact, even our COVID vaccines that we've gotten have to do with DNA and RNA. And all of a sudden, there's a requirement for people to have a little bit better understanding of what they are. So we're going to come back to this later in the semester, but I'm just going to give you the basics here. And when we talk about nucleic acid, it says they're polymers or big chains of nucleotides. So they're macromolecules. They're big molecules. They're chains of these building blocks called the nucleotides. Remember, the building blocks of proteins are, do you remember what they are? Amino acids. The building blocks of the nucleic acids are nucleotides. I don't think that's a vocabulary word I have, but just to realize that they're chains, they're macromolecules like our other organic molecules. And the most fundamental thing about the nucleic acids is they store information, including the instructions for life. And I remember when my kid was really small. I started him really little. I'd say, "What does DNA do?" Because they heard of DNA, and I say it's the instructions on how to make yourself. Like I just kind of drilled that into him for years and years, and so that's what they do. They're the instructions on how to make all your parts. And so it's telling you a little bit more about the structure of nucleotides. I'm not going to go into that. Just again, it's just beyond the scope of what I can do in this course. But the thing to remember about nucleotides, or I'm sorry, nucleic acids, is the two major ones are DNA and RNA. And we've all heard of those. And DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. You don't have to memorize that. But it's a nucleic acid that stores information about how to copy and replicate itself. And so it says, but also specifies the order in which amino acids are arranged in a protein. So DNA contains the instructions on how to make all the proteins. And remember I said, when you look in the mirror, you see proteins. So DNA is the instructions on how to make all the proteins. RNA, on the other hand, is the instructions on how to make one protein. And it's a copy of a piece of DNA. So in one cell, you're going to have a lot of DNA. In fact, every one of your cells has all the instructions on how to make all the proteins in your body. RNA is a copy of just part of that DNA that is the instructions on how to make some proteins. So in our liver, we don't need to make skin cells. So any proteins that are specific to the skin, there's instructions on how to make them in liver cells, but you don't make RNA for that. You only make RNA on how to make liver cells or liver proteins. So DNA is the instructions on how to make all the proteins in our body. It's in every one of our cells. RNA are copies of pieces of DNA that have the instructions on how to make some proteins. And we're going to expand on that when we talk about DNA technology. The last thing I want to talk about in nucleic acids is the concept of ATP. And ATP, again, a lot of people can understand the concept. They forget it's a nucleic acid, but it has a structure very similar to DNA and RNA. And ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is a nucleic acid, but it's an energy carrying molecule. And it's a really important energy carrying molecule that our cells use to involved in chemical reactions that need and make energy. So we can just say, a lot of people will describe ATP as a high energy molecule, but it is a nucleic acid, and you'll probably hear about it in this course. This chapter has a lot more information on it about DNA, RNA, and ATP, and you might want to watch this video just to kind of get it in your mind, but that's as much detail as I'm going to ask you in this course, in this section right now.